Good afternoon. My name is Bonnie, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Noble Data Analytics conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. If you should need assistance during the call, please press star, then 0, and an operator will come back online to assist you. Thank you. I would now like to turn the call over to Mr. Tom Miller. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, this is Tom Miller. I'm the former CEO of ALI Solutions and now the current Vice President of Analytics here at Noble Systems. Today I'm joined by Bill Andrews, Strategic Solutions Director at Noble, and Alan Vondrell, Director of Channel Marketing. So in terms of the agenda today, and maybe I'll go back to September 25th, Noble announced at that time that it had acquired the assets and the business of ALI Solutions. And today I will talk to you about the value that that acquisition brings to the marketplace, as well as a brief overview of our analytic solutions. And we'll make sure to leave time at the end of that session for any questions that you may have. First of all, for those of you that may not be familiar with ALI Solutions, our company was originally founded as Austin Logistics over 20 years ago. And the first installation of our software occurred back in the mid-90s when ALI created and deployed an innovative best-time-to-call solution named CallTech. Over the years, we continued to innovate, and we've continued to bring new and creative value to our customers. And that innovation is recognized with many of the patents that are issued against ALI's products. And through those couple decades, we have also created deep domain knowledge and experience in the area of outbound contact center operations and analytics. The ALI clients include some of the largest consumer financial service companies in the world, and the solutions are used across credit card businesses, auto finance, mortgage, and other lending operations, as well as many other industries that are working in the areas of collections, customer service, and sales. Today, these applications process over 500 million records every month across 6 countries, and the company has and will continue to maintain offices in both Austin, Texas, and in Shanghai. So we're very pleased to be part of the Noble team, which is just a fantastic next phase for our people, our solutions, and most importantly, our customers. Not only does ALI share similar culture and value, but we share a common vision of how the analytics and decisioning technology can be combined with Noble's core platform to deliver greater value to all of our customers. First, and importantly, we'll continue to support all of ALI's existing solutions. So that includes CallTech, OnQ, Vincio, as well as all the existing integrations with companies like Cisco and Avaya. But now, as part of Noble, we'll also be able to leverage a significantly greater resource base into both the development and support of these applications. We'll expand these solutions and expand the value and the return on investment we're delivering to the market. So even well in advance of announcing the acquisition, ALI and Noble were working hand in hand to create a best-in-class, real-time, and seamless integration for these applications, as well as identifying opportunities to leverage existing feature and functions that can provide even more enhancement in areas such as productivity and regulatory compliance. We'll leverage our extensive experience across what's now a very broad range of customers that range from some of the world's largest banks to smaller call center operations, and will provide the consultation and best practice service to support all of our customers. This enables us to increase our geographic footprint and the ability to deliver world-class service and support through the expansive international support structure that exists within the Noble world. And finally, we'll be working on strategically defining a broader analytic roadmap that will continue to drive innovation in the use of analytics within the contact center space. And now we'll move into that a little bit. And so, at a very high level, and the graphic we show here may be a little bit more sales and service oriented, but I think it provides a framework of how our analytics can fit within the core infrastructure of a contact center environment. So while we can receive both customer and prospect input records, customer and prospect records from a variety of sources that could range from a collection download file to CRM systems such as Salesforce.com or directly through the web, what ALI is doing is providing that core and important middleware section, the data analytics and decisioning, where we're taking advantage of a variety of consumer information that's resident both inside your data center as well as commercially available data, fusing and integrating that information together, standardizing it, providing a very flexible business user environment so that you can set up this type of segmentation, filtering, and customer policy that your business desires, taking advantage of analytics, taking advantage of real-time modeling capabilities, having the ability to do things like centralize enterprise contact history and, again, leverage that information. And then from that decisioning environment, driving the right actions across the various channels for execution, whether that's live agent dialing, auto messaging, et cetera. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Bill Andrews, who will take you through an overview of the analytic solutions.
Thanks, Tom. And before I move on to the next slide, I just sort of want to recap some of the critical points from what Tom's been talking about that will tie into the remainder of the presentation. And really on this slide, 4 key points to make about where Noble Data Analytics fit into this bigger picture. That's really, as Tom said, we see ourselves in the middle of the picture, pulling this data together, and most importantly, I think, putting it into an actionable form. Data about your customers, about the customers you're servicing, may be spread across multiple silos within your enterprise, might be spread across databases and files stored within as well as outside your business. It's not enough just to bring that information together. Really, it has to be fused and normalized and put into some form where you can actually take action based on that complete picture of your customer. The kinds of actions we'll be talking about here, as Tom said, are really based on rules and analytics that you can deploy to decide how and when to contact someone. They're also meant to help you target the most valuable customers. It's not really enough anymore just to generate a lot of contacts. They need to be the right contacts. And as we work our way through some of the products that Noble now can offer, we'll be looking at some of the ways that they can help you target the most valuable customers within your list and make sure that you're focusing those expensive agent resources on those valuable contacts. Finally, then, our products will help manage the flow of records to each channel, whether it's agent dialing, outbound IVR, text messaging, what have you. Products here will help you first identify the right channel and then make sure the right records are delivered to them in a timely way. So that said, let's take a look at a high level first about how the Noble Analytics products fit into the typical outbound contact center environment. And what you see here on the left side represents a fairly typical contact center. We have a host system, whether that's a collection system, it's a CRM application, whatever system it is that's maintaining the list and state of the records that need to be contacted, produces a file of those records and delivers it to an outbound dialer, potentially to other outbound contact platforms as well. Those platforms, including the dialer, make outbound contact attempts throughout the day, and at the end of the day, results then are delivered back to the host system to make sure that it has a current record of all the activity for all of those records. So the Noble suite of products is typically inserted in parallel with that then. At the top of the screen, you see our Vincio application. Vincio uses analytics to determine the best sequence of channels for each customer. So, in other words, as that list of people that need to be contacted today is generated and delivered to Vincio, it's going to go through and determine what's the best way to make each of those contact attempts. That may be a single attempt or a single channel, such as assign that immediately to outbound dialing. It may be that a better approach is to start out with a text message or a letter, maybe then move to email or an outbound IVR campaign, and only after a certain amount of time has passed without a successful contact or resolution, only then is it passed to an outbound agent channel. Vincio is going to make those decisions based both on custom analytics as well as rules deployed within the Vincio application. And Vincio is the point that's really most effective in reaching out to those external data sources, bringing all of that information together, really fusing it into one actionable record. Next up, you see the CallTech application. CallTech's well known in the industry as the best time to call application. And really, it's meant to do two things. First, to help you find the right time to call each customer. Second, to make sure that your agent resources are optimized so that you're making the best use of them, so that when you are making those calls, it's the right calls over the whole campaign, over the entire day, that will maximize the productivity of the agents you've deployed. Finally, the OnQ application. This is really a real-time interaction between the list of records that need to be contacted and those outbound contact platforms. So OnQ can deliver records to an outbound dialer, can also push records out for SMS messaging, email, and so on. And based on the information that it's receiving from Vincio, from CallTech, it's making decisions about how to manage each record, attempt by attempt. And that may mean moving a record from one channel to another even within the same day. First, then, we're going to look at Vincio, real-time analytic decisioning. And what you see here really on the right side of the screen is what we sometimes call the circle of life for Vincio process flow. Really, Vincio, as we've said, is meant to deploy analytics as well as customer-defined rules to determine the right action to take on a customer. It's an event-driven application, and that event may be as simple as a file of records to be contacted today is delivered from the host to the application. Maybe individual record decisioning as well. A single request for information comes in from a website. It's passed through a Vincio process flow to decide what the right way to respond back to that request is. Once Vincio has received, in this case, a file of records to be processed, it's next going to reach out to any additional data sources required to make sure that we make the right decision for those customers. That may mean reaching out for information from an internal call history or CRM database. It may mean connecting to an outside data source, such as Axiom for demographic information, or such as TransUnion for credit bureau information. Once we've pulled all that information together, next we're going to deploy those analytics. Predict the probability of outcome when we take a specific action on each of those records. In a contact center environment, that typically means deciding what the right way is to try to contact that customer. Finally, deploying customer rules, any limits on the number of records to be sent down per channel, for example, to return an intelligent decision, the right decision about each of those records, about the right way to contact them. And so drilling down a little bit further then, you can see maybe a more specific representation in this image of how Vincio would be deployed in the contact center. Again, would start out by trying to predict the response to each channel, and response not just in terms of probability of contact, but also probability of getting a yes, of once we've contacted that customer, is this the best channel to get a successful result, whether that's making a sale, signing them up for a new service, collecting on a delinquent account, whatever the purpose is, we're looking not just at getting them on the phone, but actually successfully resolving that record and completing it. We can also compare that with stated preferences. So while we may have predicted that one channel is the best way to reach a customer, they may have asked to be contacted over a different channel in the past. That doesn't just mean that we take the stated preference and follow that, because often what a customer tells you and the way they actually behave may be two different things. This allows us to look at both of them at the same time before we make the decision and then decide, how do we really want to proceed? Do we want to go with their stated preference? Do we want to consider their past history where that stated preference hasn't generated a successful contact? It may be that after a certain amount of time or a certain number of failed attempts, we'll put that preference aside and go with what we've predicted will produce a more successful outcome instead. Moving on then, we'll take a quick recap of the benefits that Vincio can provide, and really two main areas here. First, the ability to deploy action-specific models. Those are models that will predict the response to a specific action. For example, what's the probability of making a successful sale if we call this person today versus sending them an email or sending them a text message? What's the probability of successfully collecting on this account if we call them with a live agent call as opposed to an outbound IVR call? And that allows us to focus agents on the accounts where an outbound contact will have the biggest impact. Where can we drive the most revenue into our business and deploy our agents appropriately? Secondly, we're able to do things like identify self-cures across risk bands. So when we're calling on a campaign of delinquent accounts, we can identify customers that are likely to pay on their own or pay with a low-cost, low-impact contact, such as a text message. We can identify the best channel or sequence of channels for each account. We can go beyond that to look at the most cost-effective channel, make decisions based not just on what's most likely to generate a contact, but how that balances out with the cost of that contact.
Então tá jóia. Então deixa eu confirmar que eu vou estar no horário, mas se ele puder...
I'm going to go ahead and move on now to the next product, our CallTech application.
Antes que eu confirme com você.
As I mentioned earlier, CallTech's best known as the best time to call or when to call application that helps you determine when you should make your calls. Now, as I'm sure you're all experiencing in your own contact centers, it's more and more difficult every year, if not every day, to generate outbound contacts by phone, to get people to answer the phone. And while there are many reasons for this, I think we've called out a few of them here: difficult economic times, widespread availability of caller ID, shift to doing business over the web. More and more people, especially younger people, expect to be able to do their business and handle it over the internet, and so they're much less likely to pick up a telephone. There are those still customers who will answer the phone. We really want to get there first, get there while they still have money in their wallets to make a purchase, to resolve a delinquent account. Not only that, we need to be able to keep finding them. As customer behavior changes, the season changes, kids go back to school in the fall, school ends in the spring, holiday season rolls around, customer behavior changes. And we really need a way not just to predict behavior or predict response, probability of contact globally, not every day, all year long, not over an entire day. We really need very detailed predictions for an individual customer by hour of the day, by day of week, for the specific time of year. Beyond that, it's not just enough anymore to know who the right customers to contact are or when to contact them. We really want to focus on the value of those contacts to the business. Particularly in an outbound sales environment, we found that it's critical to look beyond just at who will answer the phone, to also look at who's most likely to have a positive response to that call, to make a purchase. In addition, some customers are easy to reach at a specific number. We need to look beyond just when we can generate a contact and really focus in on which contacts we want and which numbers are most likely to generate those contacts. And above all, what we're trying to do here with this product is make the best use of limited resources. We can only make so many phone calls in a day. It's expensive to pay for agent time. How can we make sure we're getting the most out of both, the number of calls we make and the way we're using our agents? The way the CallTech application does that is with custom analytics that are used to identify not only the probability of a contact, but also the probability of a positive response. And again, that's getting to yes, whether that's making a sale today, that's getting a delinquent account cured. It will predict the probability of both contactability as well as propensity to pay. It allows the user to combine that probability of contact with the value of that contact. we may want a specific campaign to focus on high balance customers or high risk customers in a delinquent portfolio. We may want to focus a sales campaign on customers that will receive the most valuable offer or that are most likely to generate the most revenue over time, and prioritize those so that we're not just loading them up at those high value accounts at the beginning of the day. We're not just focusing on the people that are most likely to answer the phone. We're looking at both value and contactability to make sure that when a highly valuable customer is most contactable, we're going to make that right call at the right time. CallTech goes beyond just telling you when people will answer the phone to actually match that information up with the agents you have scheduled to make outbound calls today. So when it's building a schedule out for daily calling, it's actually scheduling work for the number of agents available to make those calls. It schedules work for the number of agents we actually have on a given day, not the number of agents that we wish we had. Finally, CallTech enables simulations. There's a simulation tool available that can be used to validate staffing and calling strategies before you deploy them. You may want to know, what's the potential benefit if I add 10 agents? It's not as simple as just looking at the contact rate or the promise to pay or conversion rate for the day, because of course the overall rate isn't the same as the marginal rate when we add one more agent. Adding that one more agent is going to increase our penetration over the list, how many times we're calling it. It's not going to be as productive as the first agent we added. Here we can actually go in and run a simulation that will tell us, if we add 10 more agents on this shift, what's the impact, what's the benefit? That allows us, again, to do a cost-benefit analysis and make a really rational, well-reasoned decision about whether it's worthwhile to bring those agents on. So then recapping the benefits of CallTech, really three main areas we like to touch on. The first is we're using custom models that are rebuilt automatically. These aren't pooled models that were built using a variety of businesses that aren't related to yours. These are models built using only your own data for your own portfolio. And those models are rebuilt automatically. That means that as your business changes, as your portfolio changes, these models are constantly learning. They're constantly building in that information from your most recent dialing activity and making sure that the predictions it's making are always the best ones possible with the data that's available. Next, we go beyond just predicting contactability to predict propensity to buy or propensity to pay, but also allowing you to set an objective for each list. It's not enough just to maximize contacts. Here you can say which are the most valuable contacts within a larger pool and make sure that you maximize those to maximize the benefit to your business. Once you've set that objective, we're matching that information up with this list of available agents to make sure that it's the best possible schedule for the agents you have. The schedule CallTech builds for 10 agents won't be the same as it would build for 20 agents or 50 agents on the same day. And so by looking at how many agents will be there, we're able to give you the most productive schedule for your specific environment for that day. Finally, CallTech includes an open database of call history. That allows us to help you comply with multi-day restrictions on calls that can be made over a period of time. It also lets you optimize staffing and phone strategies. Because you can build custom reports, because you can mine that data for new insight, you're able to learn from the product, from the tool, from your own reports, how you could continuously improve your staffing, your outbound dialing, and so on. Finally, we're going to take a look at our OnQueue application. This is our advanced campaign management tool. This is the one that's interacting with those contact platforms in real time. And the image here is meant to give you an idea about how it interacts with those platforms. But at a high level, OnQueue sits above those outbound contact channels and delivers records to them as they're needed for outbound contact attempts. And that may, of course, mean typical outbound dialer campaigns, preview, predictive mode campaigns. It also may mean SMS campaigns, outbound IVR, email campaigns, and so on. So as you make decisions, call by call or attempt by attempt, OnQueue is able to deliver the next best record to each of the available channels. Some of the key benefits of the product, and ones that we'll look at in a little more detail on the next couple of slides, include automation of campaign execution, calling strategies, phone rotation, filters, time zone management. All of these things can be set up and scheduled to run automatically by hour, by day of week. It's possible to dynamically move records between campaigns and channels so that after a first attempt is made on an outbound phone channel, we want to switch that record to an SMS campaign for the next attempt. OnCue can do that, and it's going to look at each account, each event as it happens, and make a decision in real time about how to route that call for you. This tends to produce increased contact rates as well as higher customer satisfaction. Because recall strategies, phone targeting strategies are more intelligent, more sophisticated, based on better decisions and more information, customers are happier and contact rates are better. Finally, this gives you a chance to centralize compliance management across all channels, so that if we've made a phone call this morning, sent an email at lunchtime, followed up with a text message tonight, we're going to have the complete history in one location to make sure that we're tracking all activity and complying with any limits. This slide then gives you a sense of the types of things that we can automate within the OnCue application. You can see here a few examples. We have 3 different segments or 3 different lists of records, all feeding down to a campaign at the same time. We're doing that in a controlled ratio. 50% of the records are being drawn from segment A, 25% each from B and C. It's possible to set up as many lists feeding into a single campaign in this way at the desired ratio. We've automated which phone numbers are being called, and you can see we're calling home, cell, and work in the first campaign, in the first list rather, only home and cell in segments B and C. We're allowing 1 call per phone number in A and B. We're allowing 2 calls per number in segment C. Finally, we've got different recall strategies. We're calling the next number in 5 minutes for A and C. We're waiting 10 minutes between calls in segment B. All of these can be managed individually at the list level. We're able to have a completely different strategy for each of these lists and still call them within a single campaign, which means more agents working a larger campaign over a longer period of time, which generally is going to mean greater efficiency out of your dialer. The dialer is going to run more smoothly, pace better because of the larger scale. It's all possible while still maintaining very precise control over the strategy applied to each of these lists. Looking next at file preprocessing and segmentation, we touched on this a little bit earlier as we talked about Vincio. We'll come back to it now in more detail as we talk about OnCue. Within OnCue, we have the ability to go beyond simply loading a list into the system and then starting dialing. We're actually able to first import supplemental data, and as we talked about earlier, that can include internal sources such as contact histories, such as channel preferences that aren't available within the file of records to call, but it can also include external data sources, whether that's credit bureau attributes, a do not call list, demographic information, and so on from external sources. OnCue is able to reach out to those different sources, data in different locations, pull it all together before we load the file into the system. Then we can calculate new variables with data from all those sources. That may be as simple as taking a balance on an account and the credit limit and using them together to calculate over-limit percentage. It may be much more advanced, using a number of different fields from a variety of sources and using that along with custom analytics to decide what's the best channel, what's the best offer to make for this customer, and so on. It may be deploying an in-house risk score that you've deployed or designed in-house and using it as you're importing the file to decide whether a customer should go into a high-intensity or low-intensity calling campaign. Those variables, as we're pulling them in or creating them using the information, can be appended to each record, which means that we can use them further downstream for segmenting into different lists. They can also be pushed to the dialer and actually presented to agents on their desktop. So if you want to use OnCue to decide what the right offer is to make and then pass that information to prompt the agent when they receive the call, we can do all that here within the OnCue application. Next, we'll look at OnCue real-time control, and we talked about this when I first introduced the OnCue application. Just wanted to give a couple more examples about how it's possible to move records between campaigns or between channels. A couple of examples here. One's the option to move records from a campaign that's not leaving messages to a campaign that is leaving messages. Very often in the contact center, we have a couple of conflicting policies in place. One's the limit on the number of calls we can make per day. In my example here, that limit is 8 calls per day per record. Another is, once we've left a message, we can no longer continue to call that customer for the day. So ideally, what we'd like is to ensure that the last call of the day, whenever it happens, that 8th and final call, is the only one where we leave a message. We've maximized the number of attempts we can make per customer. Now we want to make sure that we're leaving a message in the hopes that they'll call back in. Typically what happens in the contact center, though, is this is a time-based decision. I'll make my phone calls up until a certain time during the day, then I have to start my messaging strategy. Some days that may mean there are customers that don't get their full 8 calls. Other days, it may mean there are customers that don't get a message because I'm running behind. Here I can run both of those campaigns in parallel, one campaign that's not leaving any messages, one that is, and I can use OnQ to decide where a record goes call by call over the course of the day. So for the first 7 calls, I can push that record down to the no message campaign. Finally, when I recognize that a given customer is about to receive that 8th and final call, I can deliver to the message campaign instead to make sure that I'm maximizing both the number of attempts that I make and also the number of messages that I'm able to leave. The bottom example, I'm calling customers in an outbound campaign. Now, when a customer hangs up on an outbound call, I've got a couple of options. Typically, I'm either going to wait some amount of time, 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes, try them again to try to get them back on the line and resolve the account. On the other hand, I may then stop calling for the day. I've had my connect for the day. The customer's hung up while talking to me. They clearly aren't interested in continuing the conversation. Here I've got a third option. When OnQ recognizes that I've called a customer on their cell phone, they've hung up in the middle of the phone call, I have the option to route that record out next for a text message. So I'm giving that customer control about when they make the call back in. They can decide when they're ready to pick things back up and talk to me, but at the same time I'm prompting them, I'm giving that reminder, I'm offering them a phone number. And maybe a phone number in that text message that gets them directly back to me, or maybe it gets them into a dedicated high priority split where I'm sure they'll get picked up right away. Regardless, you can see how as I go through processing call results in OnQ, it's possible call by call, event by event, to make better, more precise decisions about what the next action to take is for that record. Then wrapping up the benefits of OnQ, 3 main areas again to talk about. First, campaign automation, that ability to make sure that everything is scheduled, ready to go, running smoothly across the day to minimize downtime, make sure that complex strategies are deployed and applied appropriately. Next, that just-in-time record delivery, that intraday record movement between campaigns allows me to change strategies in real time without requiring any kind of transition. So as records are being pushed down and results are coming back, OnQ can make decisions constantly throughout the day about how best to handle them. Finally, some of the advanced campaign management features with OnQ, such as list sharing, such as phone rotation, allow me to provide improved phone targeting and ultimately increase customer satisfaction. One final slide then to look at how Noble Analytics can add value. First, Noble provides a combination of technology, data analytics, and domain knowledge. So the companies can leverage data as well as analytics, better understand their customers. That better understanding means better decisions, better real-time decisions, more proactive interaction with every customer. This in turn leads to improved efficiency, greater effectiveness in contact center operations, and ultimately delivers what we all care about, significant return on investment. We're primarily focused in the contact center on determining who to contact, making sure it's the right, most valuable contacts that we're making, how to contact them, what's the right channel, what's the best way to get a hold of each individual in our file. Finally, when to contact them, what's the right time, the best time to make that most productive call. Ultimately, Noble's trying to enable our clients to proactively communicate more effectively with customers, with prospects, ultimately enhancing customer relationships for all of our clients. And with that, we'd like to open it up now for any questions that you might have for us.
So, Bill, this is Alan. We did have one question come through on the chat line.
Okay.
I'll read it now. So it says, within CallTech, one of the benefits mentioned is to create the best schedule for available agents. The question is this only for a given day, or does CallTech also allow to scenario for future dates as well?
Right, it really meets both needs. So on a day-to-day basis, when I come into the office this morning, what I really need is the right schedule for my agents for today. And on a day-to-day basis, that's exactly what CallTech's trying to provide. For the agents that are there to make phone calls today, it's going to give me the optimal schedule that will maximize their productivity. But as I'm thinking longer term, as I'm planning future hiring, as I'm working on my staff plan for next week, next month, next year, I need to be able to look beyond just a schedule built for the agents I have now and look at what the right staffing is to maximize productivity. The CallTech simulation tool lets you look at exactly that. It lets you go in and look at a variety of scenarios and determine what's the right number of agents to have, what's the right schedule to have them work, what's the benefit if I deploy them on campaign A versus campaign B, and ultimately to find what is the optimal staffing. You can then work that into your hiring and your scheduling requirements for future gains. Are there any other questions that we can answer today? I see a couple of more questions have come in. One, if texting a customer on their cell phone, how do we get their permission? In my example earlier, I was making the assumption that we did have permission to contact the customer on their cell phone already. One of the things we're able to do with these applications is to draw that information in from a multitude of sources. So if you've gotten permission previously, if you have permission to contact a customer via cell phone, if that's included in the dialer file, great. It's very easy for us to build that into the logic to recognize not only that this is a cell phone, but it's a cell phone we have permission to use. However, if it's not included in the file, OnCue is able to reach out to other data sources and pull that information in. Now, certainly this isn't giving you a way to get that consent from a customer. The assumption here, though, is that that's part of your standard procedure in the call center. As you're contacting customers, as you're getting permission to use cell phone, that permission includes the ability to send an SMS. Certainly, there's nothing embedded in OnCue that's automatically going to send a customer out. This is only would be part of a strategy that you would deploy, design with our assistants, with our consultants where appropriate, deploy within the application and ensure that it's only contacting customers where you have the appropriate permissions. The next question up, is this a subscription-based product? And Tom, I don't know if you want to touch on that one.
Yeah, so the plan is to make these applications available both as an on-premise software solution where we would deploy inside the client's data center, as well as offering it in a PCI-compliant hosted environment. So it will be offered both ways.
Bill, there's one more here. Would the contact simulation tool, is it considering inbound calls in case you're on a blended environment? I think the question is how would it work within a blended environment?
Right. So when CallTech's looking at available resources, there are a few different ways that it can get that information into the system. But ultimately, it's always taking into account the number of agents and the number of agent hours that are available for outbound dialing. So in other words, it's not going to schedule more calls than you can handle. When it comes to the simulation tool, the same situation applies. If you're looking at historical days, you're using historical agent activity, it's going to be pulling that information in. If you are using future potential resources, again, it's going to be kind of baked into the information you provide to the system. If agents are handling inbound calls 20% of the time, then we're only going to schedule outbound calls. We're only going to simulate outbound calls for the remaining 80%.
So, Bill, we also have a couple other questions that have come in from the original question list.
Okay.
First one is this analytics package only available to Noble system users?
Yeah, and actually, so I'll answer that. As I mentioned earlier, we will continue to maintain and support integrations to the other contact center platforms. I mentioned Cisco, Avaya, Genesis Aspect as well. So the answer is no. These analytic applications will be available as part of the tightly integrated environment within the Noble platform, but will also be available on a standalone basis for integration to other contact center technologies.
Second question, how would you tailor your solutions to smaller campaign sizes?
That's a very good question, and maybe we'll focus in on CallTech to give you an example of how that typically works. So with the CallTech application, part of what we're doing is shuffling records around to different times of day to try to optimize contactability or optimize the productivity of that campaign. When we're building a schedule, the best possible schedule for a team of agents, we require some things to be somewhat predictable, and that would include volume, that would include the number of agents available. So we need to know those kinds of things in advance to build that best schedule. For cases where we have smaller volumes, where it's maybe not knowable what the size will be, where there's a lot of variation, in those cases, we have a second algorithm available within CallTech that doesn't require agent resources, that doesn't require certain minimum size for the records. And in that case, the campaign will simply be sorted within a given hour of the day from most contactable or most valuable contact down to least valuable contact, so that regardless of time of day, regardless of how long it's going to take to get through that campaign, you can ensure that when you start it up, you're always focusing on the best possible calls to make. The on-queue application is really meant to function for campaigns of any size. That might include a campaign that's processing hot leads coming in from the internet, so a very small number of agents that are jumping on calls as soon as they're made. It may mean an outbound campaign with a number of very small lists. On-queue gives you the ability to blend a number of those lists into a single campaign, if that's appropriate, to increase scale and help the dialer run more efficiently. But it's also possible to chain those lists together and move from one to another in quick succession. The nice thing here is there's no transition happening dialer side. It's simply on-queue pushing the next best records down. So your agents are in one campaign, they're making calls without any kind of transition or change happening on the dialer. It's all transparent to them. As far as Vincio goes, when we look at optimizing channel assignment, really the size of the campaign's not that significant. And certainly we can build in limits. We might require a certain minimum number that has to go for outbound calling, for example, or a maximum number of letters that we want to pay for today. But the size of the campaign isn't really an issue there because it's really targeted on individual account level decisions.
Okay, and I think we're coming up on our time here, so I'll ask if there are any final questions. Okay, and otherwise I wanted to thank everybody for their time this afternoon. As we represented on the slide, if you have any follow-up questions, those can be emailed to the info@noblesystems.com, and we look forward to being able to provide additional information as necessary. But again, thanks to everybody, and appreciate your time today. Bye.
Bye now.